All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am so excited to dive into the second section of our program today. And I am joined by Ann Shoket, who is someone I have known, loved, looked up to, and admired for many years. Ann's official bio today is she is CEO of The List and founder of New Power Media, which, Ann, I will ask you to talk a little bit about in a minute. She is also the author of The Big Life, Embrace the Mess, Work Your Side Hustle, Find a Monumental Relationship, and Become the Badass Babe You Were Meant to Be, former editor-in-chief of 17, and has appeared on America's Next Top Model. So many things, more than I could even list today. But Ann, it is such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you as we were prepping for this. I mean, really, prepping feels like the wrong word because you and I have known each other for like 10 years. And so I feel like we've been prepping for 10 years to get to this conversation. But it was nice. It's nice to think about the ways in which the relationships you invest in like grow with you, right? You don't know as we're going to talk about this, but you don't know as you're building your career, the importance of investing in the people around you. And so in any case, I'm thrilled. That was a very nice intro. And I would say the same about you if I was doing the intro.
I love it. Well, it's funny, by the way, in the conversation that we just had earlier in the event with Julia, she and I were talking about the importance of community. And I actually referenced The List, which was one of the most transformative and powerful communities that I've experienced in my career. And I'm not sure that the Muse would be where it is today if I hadn't had that experience. So before we dive into the content, do you want to just give everyone a kind of very quick overview of The List and New Power Media, and then we can jump in?
So also, I watched a little bit of your conversation with Julia, and I'm obsessed with her book. It is on my bedside table. I also love that it's not pink. I think that that's really important when you're talking about women in power and leadership. So yes, as you mentioned, I am the CEO of The List and founder of New Power Media. The List is a decade-old digital first, for a long time digital only, but digital first community of high impact women, media, technology, entrepreneurship. I say that we are at the top of our fields and at the top of your newsfeed. These are the women who are changing what it means to be powerful and successful in the world and who are paving the way for the next generation. New Power Media sprung from, I acquired The List in 2020, and New Power Media sprung from the work that I did with The Big Life. And so just to like zoom backwards, I was editor-in-chief of 17 for the better part of a decade. An entire generation of young women sort of grew up and into their power with me. And when that job ended, I wasn't done talking about how this generation is changing what it means to be powerful and successful in the world. And I wrote The Big Life as a life guide and a celebration of the ways in which millennial women think about transparency, collaboration, community, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I spent a year, maybe almost two, traveling the country, talking to young women about how to step into their power. And I wanted to stop talking about it. And I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. I wanted to make things happen. And so I founded New Power Media as a way to connect the next generation of leaders with the companies that want to help them achieve and succeed. And The List came to be a really important part of that. I was a member of The List for 7 years before I acquired it. I know the power of this community. I have never seen a group of women who are so devoted. Like, that's an important word, devoted to helping each other achieve and succeed. It's not just like, hey, who has a bookkeeper? Who has a bead on a new job? It's like, how can I help you? How can I open my Rolodex, open my social contacts, right? How can I make introductions? How can I give you advice so that you are learning with me and alongside me? And it's a really special community, and it's an important part of creating this new dynamic of power, new power that we want to see in the world: transparent, accountable, diverse.
Yes. Yes, I love that. And yes, themes that I want to dive into today. So jumping in at the top, I'd love to really ask you how, from your perspective, how does community building correlate to advancing gender equity and achieving success both individually and across broader groups?
So we are about to release some research about this very thing, which I can't talk about today. However,
I should follow you on social so they make sure to get it when it drops in a few weeks.
Follow me at Ann Shoket. It will drop in a few weeks when we're at South by Southwest. And it's really important research about the intersection of community and equity, as you asked. However, the important thing for this conversation is that no one gets anywhere alone. You could be a superstar who is charging up the ladder, who is building your business, but there's no way that you're doing it on your own. And actually, I read something recently. Someone said, if you think you can do it on your own, you're not dreaming big enough. And I really loved that. I think that that's a really powerful idea. Like, imagine the collaboration. But there are a lot of rooms you can't be in and a lot of experiences you can't have. And to be part of a community of people who are giving you the inside information, giving you the intel, telling you about how things can be, that's an important part of leveling the playing field, right? That there's no longer this idea of like need to know or like top down hierarchy or like closed door meetings, right? You want to be in those meetings. You want to be the person who needs to know. And that's where your community comes in. The challenge, and I think particularly for this audience as you're building your career, is to show up for the people who show up for you, right? That's how you build community. And it seems so like obvious, and yet it's hard to do on two sides. It's hard to show up, right? We all just want to kind of like sit in our living rooms and like whatever, relax at the end of the day. But you have to go out. You have to show up. You have to, if you say to someone, you should know so-and-so, it should be followed by, I will introduce you, right? So you have to show up for the people who show up for you. But also, one of the things I'm really aware of these days is you have to protect your energy. And so if someone's not showing up for you, you don't have to show up for them. I think that's really important.
No, I love that. And it, it really was a big moment for me when I read, I think it was when Adam Grant published his research on givers, takers, and matchers, this idea that, that some people are just constantly helping others and putting a lot out there in the world. Some people are constantly taking from others and just looking for where they can get something to their advantage. And then other people are going through a matching sort of lens. And, I think I tend to think of myself as more of a giver, but I think that awareness of making sure that you're giving to the right people and in the right context is so important. And, on the community front, it's also, we can only invest in so many communities. So understanding how to find the ones that both, fill your soul and allow you to bring your full self and also potentially, help you get where you want to go.
So, but I know you have another question for me, but I really do want to ask you about that, because when you and I met, I'm sure you remember, we were like at Kathy Black's annual Thanksgiving party, and like maybe the Muse had just gotten off the ground, right? Like you were just coming up in the world, but you were at this party. Kathy Black was my boss, and if you don't know who Kathy Black is, you should Google her. Like epic,
amazing woman,
and who also shows up and invests in people. She really does.
And she was an early investor in the Muse. One of the people, one of the women that I really credit for helping me. Really before, a lot of the proof points had been demonstrated.
She has a vision. She can see that it's great. I have tremendous respect for how she built her network. And actually, as an aside, I'll tell you one piece of advice she gave me that I was thinking about the other day. This is completely unplanned for the audience, so I hope it lands.
Love it.
But she was my boss, and we would go to a lot of cocktail parties together, and she would make sure that we were all working the room, right? That you weren't just standing in a corner talking to your friends, talking to the people you wanted to see, that you were like actively going from group to group and saying hello to everyone. And frankly, I saw her like masterfully work a couple of rooms where she would, crazy crowded rooms, she would come in, find the 3 people she needed to say hello to, and then like she was back in the town car. And and while I think that we've moved on to a different kind of networking these days, I think that it says something about being able to break out of your force yourself out of your insecurity or in your traditional feelings that you want to see your friends and really say hello to as many people as possible. But back to you. So you were young, starting with a vision, and you had this community of, I think, mostly women around you supporting you. How did you nurture that community? How did you even know 10 years ago that that was important for you to do?
Yeah, it's a great question because when I first started the Muse, I knew almost no one. I didn't grow up in a family that had a lot of business connections. I moved to New York City really knowing almost nobody in the city. I showed up 3 weeks before my first job started, and I remember actually being so lonely because I was like, wait, I thought this was going to be this cool experience in New York, but I have no friends. I don't know anyone. And like, my roommates got cats without asking me. And I was kind of annoyed that they didn't ask. But then I was like, this cat will be my friend. So I guess I've got that.
Oh
Anyway, when I first started the Muse, I think I knew that there was so much I didn't know. And there's really a few ways, right, to learn things you don't know. You can read them in a book if they're available in a book. You can learn them from somebody who knows them, or you can make a lot of mistakes, skin a lot of, your knees and learn the hard way. And I thought to myself, well, I'm sure there's many things I have to learn the hard way, and I can try and learn some things from blog posts or books or interviews, but there's so many things that, frankly, especially in building a company, it's hard to say a lot of things publicly about some of the most vulnerable, the most difficult things. And there's no substitute for one-on-one advice with someone who's been there. And so I thought to myself, I don't know almost everything. So I better go out and try and find people who do. And so I remember the first tech event I went to was for an incubator called Techstars. I don't remember how I heard about it, but it came across my radar and I showed up. And there was, I think, only one other woman in the room. It was above a bar. It was kind of gross and noisy. And it was like 40 or 50 dudes who all seemed to know each other. And, you have that voice inside. I was like, I just want to go home. But I showed up. And I think one thing that is useful is realizing that like social rejection doesn't actually kill you. You can talk to someone and they can be very obnoxious. And at the end of the day, like, you're fine. And so I just got used to the discomfort and to kind of, frankly, talking to myself internally and be like, you know what? You don't have to meet everyone here, and not everyone here has to be your new best friend, but you got to put yourself out there and see who you find. And actually, that very first event is where I met Rachel Sklar, who originally founded TheLi.st. And she helped connect me to some of the first other women that I knew. And, the tech space, back then especially, it was almost entirely men. There were so few other people who looked like me, who talked like me. And so I found myself really gravitating to building these relationships with other women because they were so useful in helping me realize that I wasn't alone, in helping me know how to navigate situations. The first time that an investor hit on me when I was trying to raise capital, I thought it was just me, and then realized that other women were having this experience. And I actually became very passionate then about talking openly about that experience so that other women would realize that they weren't alone. And so, I put a lot of time in the early days of the Muse into building a network and a community. And it's been so incredibly valuable. The first time I ever got on television was actually Rachel again through TheLi.st. She was programming a panel of entrepreneurs for CNN. And at the very last minute, she said, do you want to take one of the spots and go on air? And, these just incredible gifts early on in the business that I probably couldn't have gotten until much, much later, except for I had built a relationship with someone. They knew what I was doing. They knew why I was doing it. And that advice, those connections, that support, and made all the difference.
I think you also, as I'm listening to your story, you unlocked a really key part of why community matters. When you are able to share contacts, intel, opportunities, you realize that there's not a scarcity, right? That there is an abundance. And that, so often in, traditional corporate structures, but also in entrepreneurship, we feel like we're in competition with each other. And frankly, we're probably meant to feel like we're in competition with each other. It's probably to someone else's benefit that we feel like there's only one seat at the table. There's only room for one at the top. There's only one investor. There's only. And that when you start to share and be collaborative, you realize like what's for you is for you. And like, you don't have to gatekeep, which I really, is something that's been on my mind about the ways in which we pay it forward, and not only forward to a next generation in a like mentorship way, but pay it forward to our peers in the places where we are most comfortable. You and I had sort of a text online chat around allyship, right? And the idea of how do we take the privileges that we have, particularly as white women, particularly in media, and how do we help other people benefit from our privilege? And I think that that's another really important piece of community. And another, when I talk about allyship, it really is, it's a very similar principle to what we're talking about. It's about investing in the people around you because you want to see them achieve and succeed, and using your social political capital to do what's right, more than what's right, to like to actively help people put points on the board.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is one of the important things for us to keep in mind in community. For example, when, these days and for the last several years, if I'm invited to a dinner or I'm invited to speak or I'm invited to something, I'll often ask the person, are you looking for other people to include? Are you looking for, do you have extra seats? Or you have other spots? And then I will send, recommendations of other women, often, a very diverse set of women. I've also pulled out of things because, I was invited to be part of something for female entrepreneurs. And when I asked about the lineup, it was almost entirely white women. And I was like, that's not right. I'm not going to do this. But, here are 7 women who you should give my spot to who would be better suited. And I think having that perspective of bringing others in, and being just very, very intentional about the communities we build, is really, really important. And it's not always easy. If it were easy, everybody would probably be doing it. But it is right, and it creates richer, more powerful, more dynamic, more diverse communities as well.
100%. And I love that we have power in who we show up for, right? You can't show up if there isn't equality, if there isn't thoughtfulness, if there isn't a reason. I think that's really important to say, especially when we're talking about equity, and to be able to think, if we're trying to experience and benefit from other people's points of view, you want to understand that the world as you see it is not the way the world is for everyone. And I think that that's really important. To people who are listening, however, should you need speakers, please hit me up, because that is what TheLi.st is. We are this amazing community of humans who are leaders in our field, and we are happy to surface speakers, participants, experts for you. So ping me privately. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to support the community.
I love that. And anytime someone gives me some BS excuse about like, well, I just couldn't find, diversity, I'm going to be like, you're not looking very hard, because there are so many communities, and TheLi.st is a phenomenal example that I think have brought together and surfaced and promoted and celebrated so many different incredible people and women and their stories. And so, I know one other question I wanted to make sure we talked about before we got to the end. And by the way, again, audience members, if you have any questions for Ann, please drop them in the chat. But I know that there are a lot of leaders who make it a priority to foster a sense of community within their workplaces. What recommendations or guidance or thoughts do you have for individuals, leaders, managers who are looking to develop and foster community, and why is it so important?
So the key to building community and deepening community is to move beyond transactional, right? It's not, what can you do for me? How can you unlock this opportunity for me? It's, what can I do for you? I have another book here, Susan McPherson, The Lost Art of Connecting, who's another advisor to the list. And she sometimes calls me up in the morning and says, how can I help you today? And I think that that's really important because, and sometimes I'm like, oh yes, could you please ping this person? And sometimes I'm like, thank you just for asking, because I'm feeling frantic and exhausted and overwhelmed. But I think it's to ask, how are you today? How can I help you? What's going on with you, right? To move into personal space in a respectful way, obviously, but we spend so much of our time and our energy at work, and we want it to feel like part of our life, right? You don't want it to feel like I am just here to succeed and to file the paperwork. You want it to feel like actual living. And so really, even just when I was at 17, it's funny to say that because 17 was the last time I was in like a traditional big office setting. And I would walk around the office, like pop into people's office. How are you doing? What's going on? Hey, I heard that great thing was happening. And just not to make it because like you're being seen by the boss, just to be human. And I think that that's like the first step of building community within your workplace.
Yeah, I love that. And, it's been harder, I think, for a lot of people to do that in a virtual context. Before COVID, when the Muse was in a physical office, I used to block time on my calendar almost every single week to just walk around, say hi, chat with people, spend a few extra minutes in the kitchen or the communal, water fountain area, and build those connections that were not just about the transactions and were much more about who we all were as people and how we were feeling and doing and what mattered to us. That is, I think, harder for a lot of people in a world that has shifted to more video and virtual means. And yet, as you said, you have run a community that was digital only for a period of time, that is now digital first, but has these real world components. How do you think about this, the transition to more virtual means and what that means for building communities?
I mean, so when it comes to work, just pick up your phone and text somebody or send a little message. How you doing? Thinking of you. I did it 3 times. I actually did it 3 times today. And I admit this is not my regular practice, but today I was not worried, thinking deeply about a couple of friends, and I wanted them to know. And I just pinged them, thinking of you, can't wait to hear more, hope you're okay. And to do that is really important. Now, the other thing, though, that I think is amazing about technology is like, you don't have to go to the boring cocktail event and like toast bad wine and to meet people, right? Like your most important relationships are probably your group texts. And so to really build those kinds of communities, folks who you can intentionally agree to be in community with each other, WhatsApp groups, or I know some folks have moved on to Signal, and like you can do it with a face mask on, your computer open, reports that have to be filed, and like never leave your couch. I love that. The idea of like never putting on high heels again appeals to me tremendously. And I think just that like casual outreach, how are you doing? What's going on? Thinking of you. That really goes far. People are feeling lonely. They're feeling stressed. They're feeling overwhelmed, and they're feeling unsupported. And if you can be part of that support system, that goes a long way.
Yeah, I love that, because I think people often think about finding community, but equally important is building it. And one of the tactics that I have seen work really effectively is people saying, hey, to 2 or 3 friends, why don't each of us bring one person that the others don't know and get, the 6 or 8 of us on a Zoom or together in person around a particular topic. Maybe we all work in marketing, or we all have something similar about our lives, and problem solve that or discuss it together. I will also say, for people that are looking to find community, one of the ways in the early days of the Muse that I found so many of these kind of powerful communities that I became part of, to your earlier question, is I would just ask. When I met somebody that I really connected with and that I felt perhaps had a similar value system or similar style to me, I would sometimes say, hey, I'm looking to meet more women entrepreneurs. I'm looking to meet more people who are doing X. I'm really looking to build my network and get to know others in this space. Are there any groups you're part of or any networks that you think I should be aware of? And those conversations opened so many doors. And so I know we're wrapping in the next probably 30 seconds, but any final words for those who are listening? I know that if people are interested in following you, we've got in the chat your Twitter handle and Shoket, a link to your website and book, but just anything you want to close on for the group.
I think that it can be really overwhelming, right? To not know what you don't know. And I think that you hit on it at the beginning of this conversation, where you really modeled the kind of vulnerability that will help you succeed. The idea of it's okay not to know the answer to the question. It's okay not to know everybody. It's okay not to, when people say, oh my gosh, you have to know someone and you don't know that person. All of that is okay, right? The openness to explore. And I think that is a really key feeling to hold on to. Show up for people. If you want people to show up for you, you have to show up for them. That is the key. You should do that is the key to equity. That unlock doors for people, they will unlock doors for you.
I love that. Well, Ann, thank you so much. This was a phenomenal conversation. I really appreciate your time and so excited to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. It was a pleasure. Always good to see you.
I know. I'm like, let's do it again soon.
Let's do it again.
Amazing. Thank you, Ann. And so for everyone listening, we are going to go dark for about 1 minute, go to the bathroom, get water, grab a bite, and then we will be back with Ola of Sisters in Media. Back to you very shortly.